Hello, fellow resistors. Welcome to Political Reprobate, the show about how we survive and fight back in the age of white nationalist Christo-fascism. I'm Gemma, former Republican political operative, current political reprobate, and this is a daily podcast about how power really works in America and how we the people can take it back. This podcast exists for one reason: to help you understand what is actually happening in the country so you can resist it intelligently. Subscribe, like, and join the fight. All right. As you know, I used to work for Republicans. Yeah, big fucking mistake. I get it. But it helped shape my current perspective in a huge way. Yes, I once did believe at least some of the bullshit I'm about to dismantle. And no, I will not be issuing any apologies, just that mea culpa. Because the point of this episode isn't confession, the point is explanation. Specifically, how the hell we got to a moment where half the country thinks a handful of billionaire tech bros should run democracy like it's a startup, and why that idea is not only stupid, it's fucking dangerous as hell. So today, we're talking about the myth of the billionaire genius, the idea that history is shaped by singular visionaries, and that billionaires, by nature of having accumulated more fucking money than they could ever hope to spend, are somehow smart. Spoiler alert, people with wealth are, on average, of lower IQ than the general population. No shit, I'm not making that up. We'll explore this more in a future episode, but for now, please disabuse yourself of the idea that money equals intelligence. And for fuck's sake, please stop worshiping these shit weasels. But I digress. Yeah, the billionaire genius narrative, the Elon Musk narrative, the Steve Jobs narrative, the Peter Thiel democracy is overrated narrative. The fantasy that somewhere out there is a very smart man, always a man. There is no room for women in this myth. There's a very smart man who understands everything. And if we had all just shut up and let him run things, the trains would run on time. Now, if that phrase made you uncomfortable, the trains run on time, congratulations. You know a little bit about fascism. Because the strongman fantasy is not new. Hell, it's as old as governments themselves. It's just been rebooted for the tech era. The title of this podcast plays on my political experience, but I'm also currently a technology consultant, a Gen X punk who grew up on Black Flag and dial-up internet, and someone who has spent way too much time inside systems that pretend to be run by geniuses, but are actually run by sleep-deprived weirdos arguing over Slack. Which means I'm in a good position to tell you a secret. The billionaire genius? It's mostly a marketing campaign. Bullshit to reinforce our cultural notion that money and celebrity means someone is smart or should be listened to, or both. Let's start with the mythology. The story goes like this. A brilliant founder sees the future before anyone else does. Everyone doubts them. They persevere. They build a revolutionary company. And through sheer intellectual superiority, they reshape civilization. The story is everywhere. Business books, tech conferences, podcasts hosted by guys who think a Patagonia vest counts as a personality. But here's the reality. This myth is full on bullshit. Innovation almost never works that way. It's networks, teams, public research funding, thousands of engineers, supply chains that span continents, government subsidies, labor from people you'll never see on a magazine cover. Take the iPhone. Yes, Steve Jobs mattered, but the technologies inside it came from decades of publicly funded research. GPS, U.S. military. Touchscreens, university labs. The internet, government infrastructure. What the billionaire genius does is not invent the future alone. They package it. They market it. They tell a story about it. And if they're really good at telling that story, people start believing they're gods. And gods deserve worship, right? Yeah, you see the problem. Now, here's where my first career comes in. Because politics runs on exactly the same trick. Let me ruin another myth for you. Political campaigns are not run by masterminds. They are run by chaotic coalitions of overworked nerds fueled by caffeine and panic. You've got pollsters, field organizers, digital teams, fundraising consultants, communications people, lawyers, donor whisperers, volunteer coordinators, opposition researchers. And every one of them believes they understand the election better than everyone else. Now imagine 50 of those people arguing in a room while the news cycle detonates outside. That's a campaign. It's not chess. It's herding caffeinated cats. Which is why the idea that elections are controlled by a single political genius is laughable. Even someone like the Orange Fuckwit, who dominates media ecosystems in a way few politicians ever have, is not orchestrating everything. In fact, the moron shitting himself in the Oval Office is not orchestrating anything other than poorly applied makeup. What campaigns do is respond to incentives, to media attention, to voter psychology, to the algorithmic hellscape we call social media. Campaigns are ecosystems, and ecosystems cannot be controlled by one guy with a big ego and a private jet, as much as the guys with the big egos and the private jets want you to believe it. Again, bullshit. But the genius myth is incredibly useful politically because it does something very convenient. It turns power into destiny. Here's the dark part. Authoritarian movements love the genius narrative because it justifies hierarchy. If certain people are inherently smarter, more visionary, more capable, then maybe they deserve more power. Maybe democracy isn't efficient. Maybe voters are just stupid. Maybe we should let the smart guys run things. Sound familiar? Yeah, that's been creeping into Silicon Valley ideology for about 15 years now. You hear it in phrases like move fast and break things, run government like a startup, democracy is outdated, which is a wild take from people who built their fortunes on infrastructure funded by the Democratic state. But arrogance is one hell of a drug, and wealth amplifies it. Now add something else to the mix. Tech billionaires control the information systems where political narratives spread. Social media platforms, algorithms, recommendation engines, data infrastructure. Suddenly the genius myth isn't just cultural, it's structural. Because the platforms reward outrage, extremism, and personality cults. Exactly the conditions where strongman politics thrives. Now, let's talk about the other piece of this puzzle, foreign disinformation. Because if you think American democracy is chaotic on its own, you should see what happens when hostile actors pour gasoline on the fire. Modern influence operations don't need to hack voting machines. They don't even need to persuade voters. All they have to do is manipulate the information environment, amplify existing divisions, promote conspiracy theories, boost polarizing influencers, turn every political disagreement into existential warfare. And the internet does the rest. The genius myth helps here, too, because people want simple explanations for complicated problems. If something dramatic happens, there must be something more to it. A puppet master pulling the strings, a brilliant strategist. But real influence operations look more like ecological disruption. Thousands of small signals interacting. Bots, memes, influencers, algorithmic amplification. It's not elegant, it's messy, which again is exactly how campaigns work, exactly how social media works, exactly how human societies work. But messy systems make bad stories, and billionaires make great ones. All right, let's pause this lecture shit for a second, because I can hear some of you thinking, great, everything is chaotic and billionaires are full of shit. What exactly are we supposed to do about it? Fair question. This is the part where my inner pump shows up, because Gen X learned something growing up in the shadow of institutions we didn't trust. You don't wait for the heroes. You build networks, grassroots organizing, local politics, mutual aid, independent journalism, community defense, the unglamorous stuff, the boring stuff, the stuff that actually sustains democracy. Fascist movements depend on something very specific: apathy. They need people to believe resistance is pointless, that the system is already captured, that powerful men will inevitably run everything, which is why the billionaire genius myth is so useful. It tells you resistance is futile. It tells you power flows downward from extraordinary individuals. But the truth, and this is the part they hate, is that power to democracies flows sideways and upward through networks, communities, institutions, and yes, sometimes extremely stubborn citizens who refuse to shut up and who speak fuck you truth to power. So let's get practical. If you want to resist authoritarian creep in America, here's some advice from someone who has watched campaigns from the inside. We'll talk more about all of this in future episodes. But first, local politics matters more than you think. School boards, county commissions, state legislatures, these are the arenas where extremist movements quietly build power. They're boring. They're procedural, which means most people ignore them. Don't. Second, support independent media. I cannot emphasize this enough. The fuckwits in the corporate media have sold out and are merely an extension of the fascist regime at this point. Independent media is filling the information vacuum left by the collapse of local journalism, and bad actors love vacuums. Third, build real-world networks. Online activism feels powerful, but real political resilience comes from relationships and physical communities. People who know each other, trust each other, and can mobilize when things get fucked up. Fourth, stop worshiping billionaires. Can't say this enough. Seriously, they are not philosopher kings. They're rich guys who want specific economic gains for themselves. Some are brilliant, some are lucky, some inherited their wealth, and some just happen to build companies at the right moment in history. None of that qualifies them to run a democracy or even to be worthy of your respect. When I worked inside Republican politics, I learned something that stuck with me long after I left. Movements win when their opponents underestimate them, and they lose when ordinary people decide they've had enough and just give up. History is not driven by singular geniuses. It's driven by collective action. Civil rights movement, labor organizing, women's suffrage, marriage equality, none of those were billionaire projects. In fact, if you see billionaires getting behind some sort of social movement, it's almost never for a good reason. But again, I digress. These were messy, decentralized movements powered by stubborn humans, which means the future of American democracy will not be decided by tech CEOs or venture capitalists or political consultants. It will be decided by millions of people making choices about what kind of country they want to live in. Messy, complicated, democratic choices. Exactly the kind that billionaire geniuses hate. And here's another thing. Controlling electoral outcomes is not even close to the most sinister thing the billionaire oligarchs want to do to our country and to us. But that's a topic for a future episode. For now, we need to focus our attention on the shorter term. So the next time you hear someone say democracy should be run like a startup, remember something. Startups fail all the fucking time. Like most of them. The vast majority. And they fail catastrophically. Spectacularly. Sometimes after burning through billions of dollars, which is not what you want for your government. For an example of why, consult your favorite independent journalists. What is happening right now in today's headlines is just the beginning if these billionaire fucking oligarchs get their way. Democracy is slower, more frustrating, more chaotic, but it has something startups don't: legitimacy, participation, and the ability to correct itself when enough citizens demand it. Which means the real lesson of the billionaire genius myth is simple. Nobody is coming to save us. Not political saviors, certainly not tech billionaires. Just us. We the people. Messy, stubborn, occasionally profane citizens trying to keep the ship from hitting the rocks. Stay loud, stay skeptical, and don't let the billionaire geniuses and their sycophants bullshit you. I'm Gemma, former Republican political operative, current political reprobate. Join me. We're just getting started.